Hello and welcome back to Vox Terra, aka Hidden Agendas. So Winter Storm 2026 that just devastated much of the American South with freezing rains and snows and power outages and deaths. Sometimes this is referred to as like a polar vortex that's affected much of North America. And it isn't even just in the US of A, but it's also been Canada. You've had record snowfalls in the greater Toronto area, I believe. And I've heard about recent wildfires in South America where it's been super hot and dry. Yet you got, I think Donald Trump tweeted something like, or X'd, whatever they call it now, something like, one of those, where's your global warming? It's freezing out here, thing. Okay, look, it's for some of my regular viewers who've been with me for some years now, this will be a bit of a drill, but the physics of this stuff is really simple, I think. And the bigger question is why the media generally ignores it. And for some of my regular viewers, that'll be part of our drill too. So our planet's been heating up by a process set in motion by the excessive burning of fossil fuels. And the science of this is nothing new, amigos. I've showed you in earlier shows. It goes back to the 1800s. Two little things affect Earth's temperature primarily. Its proximity to the sun and the composition of the atmosphere. Well, what's changed most has been the composition of that there atmosphere by adding, recently it's been roughly around 40 billion tons of fossil fuels dumped into it annually. A stat everybody ought to know, yet they don't. And this here place is heated up roughly 2 Fahrenheit hotter since the start of the Industrial Revolution. And this stuff I've been citing to you from NASA and NOAA going ways back now. Well, okay, if it's all hotter, why in the heck we're getting these cold blasts? Well, the Arctic is heating up faster than the rest of the planet, both poles. Why? Well, it's really simple physics again. It's feedback. You lose that ice, you're losing the Earth's reflector. You're losing its air conditioning system. You lose the reflector, and then less heat is reflected off of that Arctic, exposing more dark ocean or dark land, and then more heat's absorbed and you lose more ice. It's a negative feedback loop. Plus you got a lot of methane trapped in that permafrost. Another scary one, another story. The process set in motion by the burning of fossil fuels starts taking on a life of its own. Mother Nature is saying, hey, you want to keep heating this place up, jackasses? I guess I'll join the party. You're also losing like a big ice cube in the ocean, which cools down the planet. So you want to think of this as we are losing that which has stabilized the climate for thousands of years. The stable climate human civilization has grown up under. So as the Arctic heats up faster than the rest of it, you're losing that temperature differential between the cold poles and that hot equator. All those atmospheric currents and like the jet stream, oceanic, like the Gulf Stream, they're dependent on that pull and push from cold to hot. So now they're getting out of whack and sluggish. Cold air masses can just slump further down to the equator or further towards the equator, and hot air masses can push up further towards the poles. Also, with all this ice melting, you're losing some of the ocean salinity, and that changes salinity, and that also changes these oceanic currents. That's one of the big things is messing with those currents. The next big simple physics of how a heating planet is changing everything is the hotter atmosphere holds more moisture than a cooler one. I read in Scientific American recently, you can analogize it to like a sponge. It's just soaking up a lot more. So everything gets a lot drier because that sponge is just soaking up more. Or when you wring that sponge out, it's coming down in heavier downpours or heavier snowfalls, more intense, more limited. I read also in NASA, the water cycle is speeding up. And that doesn't just take us to these more intense snowfalls, intense rainfalls, and floods, but if you flip it around, it brings us to these crazy wildfires happening in places where they weren't that common before. Or they're more intense now than they used to be, because you get that heavy downpour. Well, the vegetation goes nuts for a while. Good nuts is we're having a great time. But then that same hotter atmosphere just dries everything out. Now that vegetation's all sick and dying, weakened. And then the heat comes, the spark, and it all just lights up. So why in the heck doesn't anybody else make it this simple? Well, you got a few factors there. I heard one climate scientist activist say, you can't just nitpick everything like what event would have happened if we didn't heat up the planet, weren't heating it up, what event wouldn't have happened, because that's an endless game. You want to just look at the stats, the simple physics of it, and the probabilities, because that's all science is. That's all we know for sure. But it ain't sexy to get somebody on the news saying, well, the probability. They want to hear yes, no, but it doesn't work that way in reality. That's thing one. But thing two with the scientists, and then I'll get to the fossil fuel industry at the end, but thing two with the scientists is it's no one's job to ring that alarm. Okay, these scientists are working at a university or some kind of research institute, and they're just paid to be experts. They're doing whatever they're working on, but their job is not to warn the public. There is no one hired to do that. Hey, it's my job to warn the public and make it simple. No, they went through getting their PhD or whatever to be an expert, and their nature is we're all just somewhat have a selfish streak to us is to protect their expertise, to nitpick. Now, there is something called climate attribution science, but that's going to come out after the storm event happened, after the extreme event happened, and by then it's not really in the news cycle. Then we got the whole idea of normal. See, NOAA changes what normal is as they it's not nothing bad they're doing here, but they change what normal is. I think it's on a 30-year cycle, calculating what the average is. So now we're in a new 30-year cycle where maybe the norm is now hotter, drier, wetter, that kind of thing. So what was normal, 30 years prior is different now. So that helps us lose track of the fact that it's all unraveling and heating because the goalpost of normal keeps shifting to more and more extreme. People's memories no one's got a photographic memory. Did that lake really freeze when I was younger? Did me and Pops really go walking on it? Or is that just a false hallmark memory? I don't know. It was so long ago. That's kind of how our memories are. Then you got the younger generations don't remember what I would remember. And then there's people older who remember things differently than I would. And then you got all the people who don't remember, they're gone now. So like, somebody who remembered winter in the 40s or the 30s. But the biggest thing of all is the influence and power of that fossil fuel industry in our system, the American system. The millions they give annually to the politicians to incentivize them to either keep their mouth shut about their role or deny their role and promote them. Then there's their influence within the media, similar to what happened with the tobacco industry in the old days, disinformation campaigns, advertising dollars, and other maybe ties through interlocking board of directors, sponsorship. I've even seen about sponsorship of YouTubers from fossil fuel interests, or sponsorship of influencers on Instagram. So that's it in a nutshell. You heat up the planet through a process set in motion by the excessive burning of fossil fuels. You got a nation dominated by that fossil fuel industry, and that permeates through the media and through the public's thinking. Once you can see the problem, then you can do something about it. Well, as always, thank you for subscribing, commenting. Thanks to my couple of patrons at Patreon, Bella Grissi, Environmental Coffee House. And as always, until next time, peace be with you.